Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. My name is Noelle Figueroa, and this is the P.W.P sessions. That's the Poets with Purpose sessions. This is episode number 19, and I'm excited and honored to be interviewing another poet and author by the name of Terry E. Carter. Thank you all so much for joining me. Just going to do a brief introduction before we dive into the conversation. Thank you all so much for tuning in. So this is episode 19. And for those of you that may not be familiar with this podcast, the P.W.P sessions, or the Poets with Purpose sessions, is a podcast I created back in April of 2021, where I have interviews with new or established authors of poetry, and I give them the opportunity to feature a performance of their work with an audience Q&A session at the end of the interview. I am the host and creator, Noelle Figueroa. I am a poet, author, blogger, workshop facilitator, and event host. And tonight's guest is Mr. Terry E. Carter, and this is a brief bio about him before we get started with the conversation. Mr. Terry E. Carter is a gifted writer and speaker. Terry is also a classically trained poet whose literary influences range from Shakespeare to the Harlem Renaissance. Terry is a husband, father, an ordained deacon, and arts minister. He enjoys taking contemporary life and faith experiences and translating them into word pictures that engage people in a truly unique way. His insightful lyricism cuts directly into the heart of problems of race, culture, and social justice. He has published 5 volumes of inspired poetry, including his most recent book, Brown Skin and the Brave New World, a poet's anthem, which was released in the fall of 2020. Terry is a cancer survivor and has written about this journey extensively. He was just recently chosen as Medford's first ever poet laureate. And for more information about Terry, his poetry, and his books, please visit his website, www.brownskinpoet.net. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you all Mr. Terry E. Carter. Hey, Terry, good evening. How are you today?
Good evening, Noel. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for reaching out to me. I'm very excited about this conversation. Thank you for joining me tonight. So I'm going to start off with a basic question that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
Who is Terry E. Carter? How would you define yourself or describe yourself?
Going at it from the way that, kind of others describe me and the things that I've embraced out of those descriptions, I guess I really like to think of myself, and, maybe this is, kind of a little bit braggadocio, but I like to think of myself as a Renaissance man. In addition to writing poetry and in other genres, I paint oils. I love to dance. I have a bunch of different hobbies and several different professions as well. So I like to think of myself as well-rounded and, generous and caring about people.
Awesome. Excellent. And first off, I want to congratulate you as being chosen as a poet laureate for Medford. That's in Massachusetts, correct?
Yeah, Medford, Massachusetts. I should have made that clear in the description, because there's Medford, Oregon. I guess there's probably a Medford in every state in the country. So
right. No, that's fine. I do congratulate you. Can you share with our audience about what the process was to become a poet laureate? Like how were you chosen for such an accolade?
Okay. The city of Medford, under the leadership of their mayor, her name is Brianna Lungo Curran, looking actually at a neighboring community called Somerville, who has had a poet laureate for a number of years, decided that it was something that they wanted to do for themselves. And so what they did is they put an outreach in the wind, inviting poets from Medford and poets with deep ties to the community to apply. And then they had a committee that sat and looked at all the applications and made a determination that I was the appropriate candidate. And so they asked me if I wanted to become the poet laureate, and I certainly said yes. And that was in July that I was inaugurated. And I've been, doing, bits and pieces and little things in and around the community of Medford. I have a number of things coming up that I'll be doing there as well. But that's kind of the way the process was. I think that there were probably 6 candidates. So there was some competition, and some of those poets are actually good friends of mine. We've collaborated on different things. So no animosity, no, no jealousy or infighting, pretty clean process. And this is the way it turned out.
Well, that's excellent. Well, congratulations. That's an awesome achievement.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Now let's go back for a minute to your beginnings.
Okay.
As far as a writer. Like,
yeah.
At what point did you know that this was something that you wanted to pursue? How did you begin?
It's funny, Noel, and you probably have a similar story. If this thing doesn't go like this, it's not a straight incline. It's got peaks and valleys.
Right.
And so I probably started writing with intentionality when I was about 16. I was in high school. I had a Greek English teacher. Her name was Eleanor Kukovitis, and she was very instrumental in starting me off as a poet. She gave me a copy of Langston Hughes's collected poems. And my high school was predominantly white. There wasn't a lot of significant teaching about the African-American experience. And for her to give me that copy of book, a copy of that particular book, I really immersed myself in it. It was just a joy to my spirit, and it started me on the way to writing. And I'd always written pretty well, even for a young person. Got some commendations and some accolades for my writing. But then when I turned my attention to poetry, I think I really started to kind of come into my own. But as things go, I put it aside. Interested in other things, doing other things. And when I got to college, Fisk University, I'm an HBCU grad, I decided to pick it back up again, especially because, and it's gonna be funny, because of the ladies. The ladies love poetry.
Right.
So it was part of the wooing process.
Right.
A couple of ladies that you were interested in, you knew they like poetry. You whip up some stuff. And then there was actually an honor society, Lambda Iota Tau, that I wanted to become a member of. And in order to become a member of that honor society, you had to turn in a manuscript of several poems, and they had to do an evaluation and determine whether or not they wanted to inaugurate you into the honor society. So I did, and I was made a member of Lambda Iota Tau, and I kept writing. Went home after I graduated. Again, life takes over. You get into different things, put the writing aside.
Right.
And then in 2009, I was laid off of a job that I'd had for about 11 and a half years. And in the time between being laid off and going back to work, I wrote my first book. And it's funny because I don't think that if I had kept that job, that I would have written that book. And it led to me writing 4 more, and I'm working on a 6th book now. So life, God, the universe takes you in the direction that it thinks you should go. And if you pay attention and you work with intention, you get to some of the places that you think you might have wanted to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to that to a degree, in my own poetic journey, just out of my own personal life experiences, and and just coming to the realization that this was something that you're pretty much God has given you to pursue, more or less. So you know for yourself when it's time to actually, really lock into what your purpose is, in that regard. So I can totally relate to that. What were the first subjects that you wrote about, like in your beginnings of poetry?
Writing about the experience of being, in an HBCU, writing about love, writing about, Black history. I remember one of the early poems that I wrote as part of my manuscript for Lambda Iota Tau was called All My Heroes Are Black Men. And it's, a long piece that really is, kind of a survey of history and accomplishment of Black men in America. So things like that, those were definitely things that I gravitated toward in my early writing.
Excellent, excellent. What would you say is your motivation for writing? Because, we all write for different reasons and different purposes, right? What would you say your motivation is? What is your motivation for putting pen to paper?
I want to, educate people in the way that I can about, kind of who we are as a people, what we're about. I want to write about, the faith experience. I'm a born again believer and have been for, 40 years at least, and probably before then, but seriously, for about 40 years. Married to a pastor. We're both in ministry, and so that's a lot of where my work goes. And then also about community, about neighborhood, about change, about embracing it, and not getting swallowed up by it, and about our experience as a people in America.
All right, awesome, awesome. Well, bless God for that, because I'm also born again. And I've been saved about half the time, about 22, 23 years. And part of the reason why I pursued my writing is because I felt God was leading me to put, pen to paper to speak on certain things, whether it's my own life experiences or, current events, other issues. So I can definitely identify with that.
Absolutely. We got that. Definitely.
Yes. Bless God. That's a beautiful thing. Who would you say, who or what would you say has developed your skills as a writer?
And again, I'm sure we're going to be speaking from the same experience, but part of it is just, it's just practice. It's just sticking to it. Mm-hmm. It's getting some early tools. As I said, I had a really good English teacher, and then several others subsequently. But Eleanor Kukovitis in high school, and then Dr. Leslie Collins when I was at Fisk, and another instructor by the name of Andre Israel, and they really challenged me because I think they saw, the germ of a decent writer in me, and they really wanted to, kind of bring that out. Another instructor by the name of Arlene Clift, they were, really skilled. Not only at writing themselves, but also at evaluating and training up writers. So it's that combination of getting education and training, and then, kind of practicing those skills and kind of keeping at it, and also diversifying your writing. We write in a poetic genre, probably primarily, but if you can write other things, I think it actually helps you as a poet. If you can write essays, if you can write I think the word I'm trying to get at. But if you can write in other genres, it makes it easier for you to write poetically. And then listening to a lot of stuff and reading a lot of stuff. If you don't read, you'll never be able to write.
Right.
I truly believe that you have to read. And I like to think of myself as well read, and I'm intellectually curious. So
excellent.
I think, those are probably the things.
Right. That's awesome. And I can totally attest to that because, along with my poetry, I have a blog. And in that blog, I write articles mostly pertaining to issues concerning, the Christian faith, my perspectives concerning issues pertaining to my faith walk, issues pertaining to the church, things of that nature. So I try to alternate with writing styles with that in terms of my subject matter with poetry as well as with my articles. So it's very true that it does help to have a variety of writing styles to be able to switch up, to be able to, draw people's attention. So to show that you're well-rounded, I definitely agree with that totally.
Yeah.
Now, I also want to congratulate you. As you stated in your bio, you've published 5 volumes of poetry. Were those books self-published?
The first one was not. The first one, I actually had a quote unquote traditional publisher. I submitted the work. They deemed it acceptable. They published it. The only thing about it is that they were not really an ethical organization. They got into a lot of trouble, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of problems with their authors.
Right.
I actually ended up having to buy back my rights to the book that I published with them, and it's for at least for a little while. I have inventory, but it's out of print, and I later on next year I intend to republish it with the publisher that I have now, which is all 4 of my other books were self-published through them, and they're actually a faith-based publisher called Zulon Press.
Oh, awesome. Yes, I'm familiar with them. So that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, how would you describe, the experience of self-publishing, from the time you conceived your book until the time it was finished? How would you describe that process?
I think it, can vary by organization, and if you get a good and attentive organization to publish with, it's not unpleasant. Poetry is a little bit different because the editing process with poetry can be, you're not necessarily looking for somebody to go in there and mess with your stuff. Right. Your punctuation, your phrasing, your cadence, your rhythm, your line spacing, all of that, if you're good, and I'm sure you are, it's very intentional. So, I wasn't looking for anybody to go in and cross T's and dot I's for me. I was really just looking for someone to, kind of format the book in the vision that I had. And then if I decided that I wanted them to do the cover, and I did all of my covers myself as well, or help with, the design, so on and so forth. It really is more the financial and the technical. I think I had it after I had published my first book. I pretty much had a sense of how the thing worked. And it was just a question of finding somebody who I thought I could, trust and rely on for the next 4. And it's been pretty good. It's been pretty smooth. I've submitted manuscripts that were what I consider to be very finished, very polished. And they basically have just, they produced the work.
Excellent. Now, would you say that you have a preference between self-publishing and the traditional publishing route?
I'll say it like this. If I was a novelist, and somebody offered me a couple $1 million advance, or I was a biographer and I, wrote the compelling biography of Barack Obama, and Hope Mifflin or Putnam stepped to me and said, we're going to give you, $500K, we want your book. I think that I would really like the experience of being with a traditional publisher again. But until that, happens, it doesn't happen nearly as frequently as with poets. I'm content. I like having the amount of control that I have. I don't need an agent right now. I'm not looking to make $1 million writing poetry, but I'm looking to get a message out. And I'm looking to be true to the art form as I see it. Right. And that the one thing that self-publishing allows you to do is to, kind of to be your own man, be your own woman, as the case might be, to be your own person in getting the message forth that you have in your heart to write.
Right. Yes, and I agree with that because I felt the same way. When you self-publish, you have control of how you present yourself, and you have control over who you present yourself to. So there's more freedom in that regard for sure.
Yeah, I've been fortunate because on all 4 of the books that I self-published, I actually did a funding campaign for each one of them and raised the money that I needed to publish the books. So I have a nice community out there of friends, family, and fans that, maybe with my 6th book as well, I feel like I can tap into. So it's like the guilds in Europe those fandoms, so to speak, in the current parlance, they helped, great authors across Europe, in Italy, and in Great Britain, and in France, to publish their work.
Right.
If they thought if they liked you, then they were willing to be your patron saints. So I feel like I have a lot of saints out there that like my work, think it's of value, and want to help to make sure that I get published. So so I've been fortunate, and that's a blessing from God. That's not by my own doing. There's nothing grand going on here. But
Right.
if folks like the work and they think that you're legit, they'll support you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's important too to just be yourself and to be authentic, and I think that's what makes the difference as well, and how you present yourself. If you present yourself authentic, then you're more likely to have people gravitate to you because of that.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely,
definitely.
I agree with you 100%.
Now, who inspires you? Like, what poets would you say grab your attention and push you to be a better writer?
Mm-hmm. Well, at the outset, and I mentioned the book that I had received from my English teacher of Langston Hughes' collected work. So, kind of, he's still kind of, for me, he's still kind of the gold standard. He's I always say to myself, well, if I can get to this level of articulation, if I can get to, kind of this level of popular appeal, then I'll have done something. But I'm a classicist. I find as much value in some instances in the work of Shakespeare. I like Keats, I like Yeats, I like Coleridge. I like a lot of the classic poets, the Elizabethan poets, and then a lot of classic American poets, Sandburg and Walt Whitman, are favorites of mine. But I love Maya Angelou, God rest her gentle soul. Sonia Sanchez. I'm really fond of Amiri Baraka, and some of the Black arts poets. So it's kind of my taste kind of run the gamut. They're a little bit all over the place. Mainly it's people who write with a unique voice. I'm not a rap or hip hop person per se,
right?
But there are rappers and hip hop artists out there that are so talented, and sometimes I think that if they would turn their attentions away from, such secular minded, business and turn it toward, a little bit more, I don't, I'm not trying to convert anybody per se, but if they had a larger faith perspective, even if it wasn't the Christian faith, I sometimes think that it would take them away from the vulgarity and the banality and the nastiness that some of our more worldly poets get into, because that's kind of where I depart from all of that. I don't want to listen to anything where the lyrics have to be deleted, where they're expletives and have to be cut out, because I think if you're really talented as a wordsmith, you don't need that.
Exactly. Yeah. I agree. And you can, in that regard, you can see their potential, if they just decided to focus in that regard. Right. However, I do believe, there are, those that, do show their potential, without resorting to all of that. So I think it's just a matter of, digging through and sifting through what's there to really find, what's really has value and substance in terms of, content, presentation, and subject matter, where it's not, the cycle of, degradation, or destruction, or, for lack of a better term,
Yeah, I'm very old school. I came up, really at the very beginnings of, of rap and hip hop. So I go back to, like Run DMC, Curtis Blow, and KRS-One, and some of those, and the messages, were never so profane as to be offensive. And in many instances, they were really elevating, because what they were saying is, you are somebody. and and these are the things that you can do if you put your mind to it. So I think it's really been in much more recent history that the turn came, and and rap became super self-indulgent, super hedonistic, misogynistic, and just and profane, and that's kind of where that was my point of departure, and said, well, I'll listen to my first love. I'll go back to jazz full time. So that's where I'm at. I write about jazz a lot too, because I love jazz, man. I'm a jazz dude. So
that's excellent. Yeah, I'm into jazz myself, so I'm totally feeling that. And that leads me into my next question. Are there any subjects that you tend to write about more than others?
Yeah, especially lately, I've been writing a lot about community, a lot about, kind of the neighborhood that I grew up in, a lot about, again, about, kind of the Black experience, as it regards, kind of, organic communities, and communities that are trying to retain an organic character while everything around them is changing and gentrifying and pushing and moving and violating. So that's kind of, one of the places that I'm at right now. But as I was saying, I love writing about jazz. I love writing about the Lord, in the experience of being Christian. And then a lot of my folks that are close to me call me the poet of occasion. So if there's a birthday party or a going home celebration, or all kinds of different occasions, they'll come to me a lot and ask, well, can you put a piece together? And I've also written last year's inaugural poem for the city of Medford for the inauguration of the new mayor and the city council and school committee. And I'm writing this year's inauguration poem, and she got reelected, and I'll do that. And they're also dedicating a brand new library in Medford, beautiful multi-million-dollar building, that I'm writing a dedicatory poem to as well. So, folks, again, they kind of grab me up for different occasions. And I like writing poems for occasions because I know exactly what I'm dealing with.
Right. That's excellent, my brother. Congratulations on those accomplishments.
Thank you very much.
That's a beautiful thing. Now, you hear a lot of talk about representation, and in different scenes, there's a lot of talk about representation and being seen properly, being represented properly, and what have you. In terms of who you are and your writing, how important would you say that you're representing yourself in your totality, in terms of your manhood, in terms of your race, nationality, background, upbringing, the whole 9 yards? How important is it for you to represent yourself in your totality through your writing?
That's a wonderful question, Noel. I think it's extremely important. You used the word a little bit earlier in our conversation, authenticity. I think it's important to be, who you are, to love yourself, to present yourself, kind of in a genuine and as transparent as you feel you're able to way, because I think that resonates with people. And then the other thing, as a Christian witness, I feel like I'm an ambassador of God's word and way in the world. So I'm trying to point to the light. And if I don't walk in the light, then I'm not going to be able to point to it. So if I'm going to lead people to the Lord, I have to do it first with my actions. People would rather see a sermon than hear one any day.
Right.
So I'm trying to, I'm trying to walk in that light so that people see me and know him through me. So yeah, I think, again, it's an excellent question. I think we absolutely have to be authentic. We have to be true to our faith. But we also have to be stewards of our history and our legacy as a people. I liken myself to, to the griots in Africa, who were the storytellers of the community and who kept the community's history and passed it on to the younger generation. So I think I'm trying to do some of that as well.
Awesome. That's good to know, my brother. That's definitely on point, because that's similar to what I'm aiming for as well. Just be transparent, be honest, and let God take control and do what needs to be done when you're yielded to what he wants you to say, because what you say can have an impact on somebody, and you never know who your words are going to reach.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
awesome.
And I think you're doing that. I think P.W.P is definitely part of your process in doing that, because not only are you presenting yourself as an authentic witness of his goodness, his grace, and his mercy, but you're also allowing the people, who are, saved to come on, sit with you and talk about it as well. So you're not avoiding the conversation, which some people will do because of political correctness.
Right.
You're putting it right out there. You're saying, listen, we're going to have this conversation, go where you need to go, but let me just tell you what I do. This is my thing. So, so I appreciate that in you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Bless God. Now we're going to transition over to the next part of this podcast. I'm going to share my screen again.
Okay.
Now this portion, at this time, Terry, it's time for you to take the mic. Now, you are welcome to share up to 5 poems, any poems of your choosing, just to give our audience, an idea of who you are, and in terms of your poetry and your writing style and subject matter. So at this time, the floor is yours.
Okay. I want to start out with a poem called Gentrified. I mentioned as we were talking that one of the things I've been writing a lot about is community, and in some instances the disintegration of organic communities, Black communities in particular, because of the specter of gentrification. So that's what this poem is about. Once again, it's called Gentrified. They talk about renovating, reimagining, and rehabilitating. They rave about new visions, new horizons, and new perspectives. They revel in bistros, boutiques, and boulangeries. They fairly skip to the subway stations. They bike on the painted pathways. They Uber and Lyft religiously. Everything's on trend and on point and au pair. They've codified the way they speak about what used to be urban blight, eyesores, drug dens, crack houses, tenements, and slums, the ghetto. They've modified the way they speak about what we now see: makeovers, investment properties, B&Bs, brownstones, townhouses, condos, and co-ops. Everything's vintage, bohemian, artsy, and retro, with creative green spaces and lofted open places. Speculators bought lower than low, patiently waiting for the change, waiting for the junkies to move on, waiting for the squatters to give up, waiting for the Black and the brown and the tan to fade. They waited for the graffiti to erode. They waited for the chain link to corrode. They waited for the families to implode. They waiting for the prices to explode. They waited and they calculated. They waited as folks capitulated. They waited as folks evacuated. They waited as folks migrated. Then the realtors came in and dispelled white folks' fears. The architects came and re-engineered. The designers came and changed the veneers. The builders came and the new folk cheered. Now they moved closer to work in the city, to quartz countertops that made kitchens pretty, to charter schools, nannies, and Volvo drivers, and bike frames made with carbon fibers, to Starbucks lattes and artisanal breads and articulated sleep number beds, to $1 million urban showplaces and fewer Black and brown faces. They showed us their heels when they took the white flight. Then they crept back in the dead of night. With fat bank accounts, they were IPO wealthy. Their move to displace was measured and stealthy. All the potholes now smoothly paved over. Brown folks got schooled like a curry crossover. White folks doing a long-term sleepover. exclusive, obtrusive, extreme home makeover. With a spoonful of sugar, they took all the clover. Changing the context of neighborhood with subway tile and exotic wood, Harlem, Detroit, and Chicago's South Side, Boston's South End, for sure, gentrified. Emptied the church, emptied the steeple, now it's a spot for the chai drinking people. Took down the poles and the basketball hoops, now it's a park for the dog walking troops. No more rec and community center, but a new parking lot for the monthly renter. Some folks hang on, but the die is cast. The fire consumes and the torch is now passed. Invisible lines are drawn again, and brown folks can't buy when the banks won't lend. Some folks keep their roots in the ground, but the waiting game is deep and profound. They tour the streets, noting history, yet what they want is no mystery. Harlem, Detroit, and Chicago's South Side, a reoccupation is being applied. The model cities that trickle down, no longer suited to Black and brown. The urban sprawl that used to be the only place that we could see is now a place for a growing infusion, is now the space that the gentry is choosing. Low-rise projects slowly yield to equity building leases sealed to folks who came from far afield, who won the fight when poor folk appealed, to lawyers and doctors and high-tech heroes with trust fund ones and hedge fund zeros. No more preserving community, no real thought of legacy, a small plaque here, a street sign there, nothing that bronzes the atmosphere. Oakland, Brooklyn, and New Orleans, all made targets by whites with means. Even in venerable Chocolate City, the news in the district inspires cold pity, killing the concept of neighborhood in ways they've never understood. And now we witness the slow, painful slide as the village we built becomes gentrified.
Awesome, awesome piece.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you, my brother. I appreciate that. Let's see. Let me see if I can find a jazz piece. And I want to read a faith piece. You know what? I'm going to read another piece. This piece actually is dedicated to my father, who passed away in 2014, and he was my hero for sure. Strong, dutiful, fatherly Black man that really kind of paved the way for the way that I have, kind of tried to live my life as a father and a husband. I've been married now for 34 years, same woman. I have a 27-year-old daughter who's an aspiring actress in Brooklyn, and I believe that the values and virtues of my father, have been born again in me. At least I hope that that's the case. So I'm gonna read this piece called Hero Mine. I've always believed in heroes, collected comic books by the dozen, Spidey, Fantastic Four, Thor, and Black Panther, watched The Dark Knight, serialized in sepia tone at the Regent Theater, played Batman's sidekick Robin alongside Billy Vargas on the stage at Hobbs Junior High. White tights dyed Kelly green and a brown felt mask. I strutted and believed, and it got in me. I watched Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am, and Bruce Lee. It's like a finger pointing to the moon. If you concentrate on the finger, you'll miss all that heavenly glory. And James Tiberius Kirk, Scotty, beam me up. And Sidney Poitier, they call me Mr. Tibbs. I watched and believed, and it got in me. I saw JFK and RFK and Malcolm and Medgar and Martin live for a principle in danger and a people in bondage. They asked not, they climbed to the mountaintop. They suffered the slings and arrows. They studied war, hurt, pain, and oppression. They died awash in the blood of conviction. I learned and believed, and it got in me. I've always believed in heroes, larger than life cats that lit up the sports pages. Satchel Paige and Jackie Robinson, Jim Brown and Joe Louis, Gail Sayers and Jesse Owens, Hammer and Hank, the Say Hey Kid and Sweetness, the Sugar Rays, the Michael Jays, the KC Monarchs, and the Homestead Grays. I cheered and I believed, and it got in me. I watched the Louisville Lip talk that trash one day, then jab and hook and smash for pay, and a heavyweight crown as Cassius Clay. But titles were lost to a prison stay, defending his own beliefs. Got no quarrel with them Viet Cong. So objecting conscientiously to the killer his country said he should be, instead he became Muhammad Ali. I marveled and I believed, and it got in me. I heard musical magicians, the Regal, the Elite, Black and Tan Fantastic, the Duke, the Count, King Oliver, Miles, Train, Bird, and Monk, jazz giants, lyrical lions. Heard that Motown sound, Memphis groove and Philly soul, Isaac and Luther, Donny Hathaway, Marvin Gaye, Billy Paul, Grover, and The Godfather. I listened and believed, and it got in me. I've always believed in heroes. I never had to look very far to find one. Never had to leave my own house, in my own street, in my own backyard. Watched a good man love his wife and children, tend his garden, sow a seed and reap a harvest. I've grown and believed because it's in me. I watched my daddy. People up here in the north seldom pronounced his name right. It's Varney, not Vinny or Barney. Pronounced his name wrong sometimes, but never in nastiness or disrespect. It's just that he was so much a Southern gentleman in such a decidedly Northern space, such a Southern gentleman. I watched and believed, and it got in me. I watched him plaster 1,000 ceilings. He did things the old-fashioned way, built his own staging with wooden crates and heavy planks, then gypsum lath and slack lime and silica sand, expertly applied to pine strapping over bone-straight studs, 16 inches on center, the hammer and the nail, the mason's hawk, the trowel and pail. I lugged and believed, and it got in me. I've always believed in heroes, never had to look very far to find one, never had to leave my own house, in my own backyard, in my own street. Watched a good man love his wife and children, tend his garden, sow a seed and reap a harvest. I've grown and believed because it's in me. And I smile now on this day when my first hero is going home to be with God the Father, because I know that the first hero I ever believed in is the first hero that ever believed in me.
Powerful, absolutely powerful, bro.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. So maybe I have time for one more. You think?
You can do up to 3 more if you like.
Okay. I just want to make sure I don't go over the time.
No, you're good.
Okay, so I want to do this piece. I've been doing doing some messages at a couple of different churches. They have me in either to do a message or to share a piece of poetry. And one of the pieces that I wrote for a message that I was going to do was under the theme of tolerance. So I wrote this piece. It's called Boiling Point. We poach people in this cauldron of language and slowly cook out their humanity. We add xenophobia and labels like aromatics and spices. Those immigrants don't belong here. Those illegals steal our jobs. Them strangers ruin the neighborhood. Damn foreigners run the country. We crush people in this crucible of race and grind their spirits with a mental mortar and pestle. Domestic terror sells ads on Facebook and Twitter. Black lives don't matter. Brown lives just shatter. Jews have even been forced to scatter. Bullets fly. Watch the blood spatter. We confine people in this closet of gender, this metaphysical morality blender, this stay in your lane, exclusion extender. L and G, B, T, and Q. Where is the pink and where is the blue? What is wrong with all of you? We pose people in this cabinet of religion. Why is he sitting in my pew? Why is that priest still fondling you? The confessional booth and the pulpit too. What happened to all the salt in the light? Must Islam and Christendom always fight? Who gets to speak for the Lord tonight? The voice on the left or the voice on the right? We scald people in this pressure cooker of identity. What do we do with the not like me? What do we do with the difference we see? Why can't we value diversity? Does the soul really have an identity? Who are they and who are we? We've cooked out our humanity. How do we reach this boiling point? How do we breach this breaking point? Why are we held at knife and gunpoint? How do we get to a turning point? What great leader can we appoint? What new Messiah must we anoint? Can anyone get us out of this joint? It's an awful and persistent bind, an entire country so maligned. How can so many be so blind? Where is the mercy we need to find? What of the good and where is the kind? Is the disease in the... Who will the Savior leave behind? I don't have answers to all of this. As the drain swirls down to a dark abyss, an affection is feigned like a Judas kiss by a spiritual kinship that's gone amiss. Where is that place of eternal bliss? I can't even smile as I reminisce. Who are these demons that howl and hiss? In this quest for beloved community, the truth must speak to the powers that be. The builders must back away from walls and repair our bridges, our homes and halls, where souls may gather in covenant and leadership pours out of government and travelers take the road above that leads to trust and faith and love. Okay.
Wow, awesome, brother. That spoke volumes.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So, in response to, oh my gosh, Ahmaud Arbery, and, so many of the tragic killings of, young Black men in our, George Floyd, young Black men in our community, I had to write a response. And I'm not taking specific issue with good policing. I know we need law enforcement. Society can't be allowed to just be, total chaos and negative free will. But by the same token, we can't have a renegade, police state that arbitrarily and regularly, kills our young men and young women as well. So this is pieces in response to, kind of how many of us have been feeling about folks and guns, and particularly police officers and guns. Black boy spied from the cruiser seat. No, okay, I'm sorry, let me go back. This is called They Shoot Black Boys, Don't They? A Tragedy in 5 Acts. Act 1. Black boy spied from the cruiser seat. No real crime, just walking the street. Always wary of prowling heat, terrorizing their urban beat. Wrong place and time for them to meet. Vicious cycle about to repeat. Bullets fly toward running feet. Shots rain down like hail and sleet. Body slumps over with no heartbeat, covered quick with a rubber sheet. Cell phone nation begins to tweet. A cancerous violence, whole and complete. Removed from justice, surgically neat. Officials expressing regret, then retreat. Community mourns death and defeat. Asphalt altars rise, bittersweet. Makeshift shrines adorn the concrete. It's like they're nothing more than meat, shot down like frightened deer to eat. They shoot black boys, don't they? Act 2. The thin blue line continues to roll, watching black youth like fish in a bowl. Conspiracy theories out of control, but no one shoots from a grassy knoll. We can't escape the daily patrol that chills our lives with the lives they stole. Candles and notes by the telephone pole, expressing our family's tortured soul. How do we fill this deepening hole? Is staying alive such a lofty goal? This public assault is taking its toll. Scary voices as dark as coal never seek to calm and cajole. A president's outbreaks coax and cajole as Twitter minions spew vitriol. The internet haters steadily troll as senators suck on the public dole and hide in plain sight from their public role. They shoot Black boys, don't they? Act 3. Beyond the movie and TV themes, the Facebook chats, emojis, and memes, this is more real than it ever seems, plunging community into extremes. Death in our nightmares, death in our dreams. Brown kids caught in police high beams. Black men subject to violent schemes as squads band together like mafia teams. Protest marches are shown on live streams as onlookers weep and America screams. A cauldron of race just simmers and steams, invoking religion only blasphemes, and the legal solution never redeems. So fires rage in hostile regimes as the neighborhood comes apart at the seams. The police state builds with iron beams, and many deny that the badge still gleams. One man rebukes what another esteems, and the fate of our children haunts our dreams. They shoot Black boys, don't they? Act 4. A question asked, a statement made, another mother's hopes betrayed. As men in blue make bullets cascade, and even as their guilt is weighed, they get desk duty, they still get paid. It wasn't even a legal raid, so another son to rest is laid. His hulking presence emerged from the shade. They saw the thug that is always portrayed. His actions made them so afraid that his keys looked like a razor blade. All training was lost in a cruel charade by roguish cops gone renegade. Yes, that's the way the game is played by a public servant's masquerade and a scared peace officer's fusillade. This is racism on parade. This is the curse of bias displayed as another Black boy to rest is laid. They shoot Black boys, don't they? Act 5. We're all waking up to the tragic newsreel where pools of red blood begin to congeal. Beyond the precinct and far afield, assault-style ordnance is what they'll wield. Stockpiling mags with ultra-high yield, Confederate banners no longer concealed. Alt-right militias, supremacist zeal, courting race war as a fruit to peel. Wives and kids eat the same happy meal. Question, to what altar do they kneel? How do they bring Christian faith to heal? What strange voices are they hearing squeal? What lack of conscience does this reveal? How do you think it makes us feel? This calculated and deadly ordeal, historically bound but so surreal, the noose replaced by Glock and steel, the new Klan riding and taking the wheel, rubber stamped by a president's zeal, and they shoot Black boys, don't they?
Wow. Powerful, bro. Powerful.
Thank you. Let me see if I have a short one. Okay, so I do try every once in a while to, write something that's a little bit more kid-friendly. In the neighborhood that I grew up in, West Medford, Massachusetts, there were several institutions that the Black community kind of gravitated toward. And one was a little convenience store on Jerome Street in my neighborhood. And it was called The Little Store. And that's what this poem is about. And this is the last one I'll share. It was a tiny red hovel on Upper Jerome, a bit run down and rough around the edges. And Mr. Henry seemed so old to us even then, with a lot of whiskers, impatient and a little scary. One would suspect that he didn't even like kids, but he really must have loved us. Or else, where did all that penny candy come from? He had all of it. No, seriously. We'd bust in there with a few nickels or a handful of pennies, all loud and unruly. He'd hush us up while he finished with grown folks' business. Then he'd be back like a black Willy Wonka up in that old shack. He'd peer over those old horn-rimmed glasses and tell us he didn't have all day. Then he'd blow open one of them small brown craft paper bags and get to stuffing while we were oohing and eyeing and huffing and puffing. See, Mr. Henry had all the treats, all of our favorites, 100 great sweets. Root beer barrels and pixie sticks, squirrel nut zippers and banana splits, green mint juleps and button strips, red licorice ropes and bottle nips. He had Bazooka Joe bubble gum and a tiny sucker called a Dum Dum, jawbreakers and Tootsie Rolls, sugary love for little kids' souls. Candy necklaces to wear and bite, and waxy red lips were such a sight. Fat gum cigars and kid cigarettes right beside the crunchy sixlets. Hot fireballs and Mexican hats. Just the genuine Hershey's Kisses, all the hits and none of the misses. Like Kit Taffy Squares and Necco wafers, Liquor Made and Boston baked beans, gold rocks, nuggets of gum in a bag, a kid's idea of sweet tooth swag. From cold January to chilly December, more kinds of candy than I can remember. At the Ville storefront on Upper Jerome, I knew I had to write this poem. See, Mr. Henry had all the treats, all of our favorites, 100 great sweets. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Excellent, excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, you just experienced the lit poetics from Mr. Terry E. Carter. Brother, those were some awesome poems, bro.
Thank you.
The subject matter, the imagery with your words, you know, you have the whole package. Thank you so much for coming through tonight. I really enjoyed the work, and I'm sure our audience did. Now, at this time, before we close out this podcast, I'm going to transition over to our Q&A portion. Just going to change the screen again for just a moment.
Surely.
So at this time, I just have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
And I'm going to start off with everything that you've done up until this point. It's like, what do you intend or hope to accomplish with your through your poetry?
Well, you know, as we, you know, alluded to as we started our conversation, you know, it's to inform and educate people about who we are as a people. And a lot of instances, it's kind of to reduce tension, it's to reduce fear, but to tell the truth. You know, it's also, you know, my way of indirect and maybe in sometimes, you know, direct discipleship, telling people about who I am in faith and in Christ, and allowing them to, you know, to see that example in a positive way and kind of come to a delight that I see in my life. I don't really have, you know, kind of these big grandiose expectations. I think everybody would, you know, who will admit it, would like to be a little bit famous, would like to have a little bit of, you know, good notoriety, you know, and maybe I might as well. But if it doesn't come to that, then that means it's not God's will. So if I'm just, you know, his poet, his little brown skinned poet, you know, saying what, you know, I'm directed to say by the things that I see around me and the way that I'm being led in my faith walk, that'll be cool. That'll be fine. But if he says that he wants me to have a larger platform and he wants, you know, my voice to go out to, you know, whoever the masses are or might be, then I'll do that as well. But I'm content in myself. And, you know, I'm writing, as I say, I'm writing this 6th book of poetry, and then I might try and do something different. I'm probably going to take a little time off and paint a bit because I haven't in quite a long time because I've been so focused on writing. And then beyond that, I probably, you know, and we talked about this earlier as well, in changing up the, you know, the writing game. I probably want to try something a little bit different. I might write a book of essays, or I might even try to do a novel. So we'll have to see where life leads.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. And what is there anything you have coming up in the pipeline, like any projects or events that you have coming up that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, you know, and I, you know, again, a lot of my stuff is is very local to, Massachusetts, north of Boston in particular. But the inauguration of the city offices in Medford will be happening. I think it's January 2nd, and I'll be sharing an inaugural poem. They're opening shortly thereafter. They're opening a brand new, beautiful new library, and I'll be sharing a dedication poem there. I'll be hosting a roundtable. The date hasn't been set yet, of poets in the greater Medford area, so that we can all get together and look at each other in the face, and whether we have to wear masks or whatever we have to do in order to do it. I'm hoping that it doesn't have to be a Zoom experience, but that's a possibility as well. And then the writing. I get to go to schools. I get to go to churches. I get to go to a lot of different places. I'll certainly have something going on Martin Luther King's birthday and several events during Black History Month. So so I get around a little bit. I'm sure you do as well, Noel, especially with P.W.P and some of the other things that you're into. So you know how it flows.
Right, definitely. Awesome. Now, before we close out, can you share with our audience where you can be found on social media?
Yes. The principal way of getting at me is on my website. It's www.brownskinnedpoet.net. And that you can find all of my books, all 5 of my books. There's some other media there. You can also, see poetry. You can see some of my poetry videos. And you can get a sense of who I am and what I do. So I think that's, really the best way to get at me. I also have a presence on Facebook. I do Twitter, not too much though. I'm not on Instagram. I don't know whether that's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not a TikToker. So, there's a lot of places where you won't find me, but there's a few good places where you will.
Okay, excellent. So as we close out, I'm just going to share one final screen, because I want to just take this time out to just say thank you. First and foremost, thank you, Terry, for coming through. Awesome conversation and dope poetics. I mean, your poetry is powerful, purposeful, definitely on point. Thank you so much for sharing your poetry.
Thank you. And listen, I really appreciate having this opportunity to talk with you tonight, Noel. It's been a real pleasure. I hope we can stay connected, because I know that you've got a word in you, and I've got to explore it and see, kind of where you're coming from poetically, the same way that you were, kind of able to see where I'm coming from in that regard too. Keep doing this. This is an important forum, whether it's, for the masses or for the minis, it doesn't matter. It's a good forum. It's a good opportunity, especially for poets to come out and represent, as you said, who they really are in the world in their own authenticity. So it's a beautiful thing, and I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now, for those of you that want to connect with Poets with Purpose, you can find me on Facebook, Poets with Purpose, also on Twitter, @PoetsWPurpose. There's also a dedicated YouTube channel with the same name, Poets for Purpose. And I recently joined Clubhouse @The Anointed Pen. Now, y'all can stay tuned for episode 20. Is featuring another poet by the name of Bushman Speak, also known as Gary Wingfield Jr. He'll be my next guest on Sunday, December 12th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, for more information about my workshop and my podcast, you can reach me at 646-372-6230. You can email me at poetswithpurpose@gmail.com. And all of my logos and flyers are designed by the awesome team at Eclipse Graphics. And to see samples of their work, thank you, definitely, they're on point for sure. You can find them on Instagram at Eclipse Graphics New York. And they also have a website, Eclipse Graphics. I believe it's eclipsegraphics.com, where you can see samples of their work and reach out to them for work for your own projects as well. And lastly, for those of you that may be interested in making a donation, you can find me on PayPal, Tap Media Man, Cash App, $The Anointed Pen. and or Zelly using my phone number. And with that, that concludes this episode. Terry, once again, thank you so much. Awesome conversation. This episode should be uploaded to my YouTube channel within the next hour or so. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Have a good night and God bless. Thank you.
Take care now, brother. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Oh, most definitely. We'll catch up soon. No question.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Perfect.
God bless.